Welcome to the Titans of Industry show. In the past few days, we've released an important microdoc concerning the debt ceiling stamped at June 1st, and the reason is that the cash burn rate of the United States government is $4,000 per second. The Treasury will be empty again on June 1st, and more debt will have to be issued probably by raising the limit. Now, granted, as the economy grows and the population increases, the debt load is sustainable, but not in the case of the United States government and the United States economy. This is getting out of hand. We also released a bombshell interview with Representative Roger Goodman, the top legislator in Washington State, on the legalization of cannabis, and that's an important interview to tune in. If you haven't studied this subject, it is going to be one of those record book style investment opportunities, and my suggestion is that you really sink your teeth into it. Today, I am pleased to do a comprehensive analysis of the big picture, and Mr. Dave Collum, he's a professor of chemistry in Cornell, is with us today. Dave, how are you?
I'm very good, and you?
I'm very well. Dave writes a year in review, and Zero Hedge picks it up, as well as Peak Prosperity. This is some good stuff. I've had the pleasure of reading this, and it's a very comprehensive read. It goes through so many subjects, and going over them, I want to go in depth about energy first, and that's because we just had the elections, and coal prices, they've been down for 6 straight years, uranium for 5 straight years. Going back 100 years, my research shown that there's no other commodity that has experienced a 6-year bear market except for coal. Now, under Trump, what are you bullish and bearish about regarding energy, and do you think coal will still suffer as this, clean energy revolution is going on, or do you think, the inevitable will happen and reality will sink in and coal companies will come back? Where do you see this? I know that uranium is worldwide is starting to pick up a lot of steam back. People are over this Fukushima thing, which obviously. If for people who don't know, there were about 10 other facilities closer to the event that nothing happened to them, and the investigation just showed that Fukushima was not complying with standards, and that's why this happened. This can happen with with anything oil, etc. Dave, what's your opinion of this?
Well, I should probably clarify right at the front. I'm sufficiently bearish on all asset classes that any idea that I have that I think is a good idea, I've got in my hip pocket, and waiting for real buying opportunities during what I think is probably a fairly imminent recession. And I think it could be a nasty one given our debt loads that you mentioned. So I've got all sorts of ideas percolating in my head that I just have to sit on because I think they're not going to be good until we get the fire sale prices. Coal, you got to pay attention to the kind of coal you're talking about. There's different kinds. There's coal used to heat and coal used to make steel. And I can't say I know much about it, but I agree with your optimism that it's been beaten down so hard. Probably the best investment I ever made was tobacco stocks right before the huge lawsuit was lost. And I bet that it wouldn't hurt them. And I put a kid through college on that idea. Coal's the same. Uranium is particularly interesting because uranium is clean by most measures, and I think you don't have to look at the U.S. to get bullish on uranium, and it's been beaten to a pulp. So when I get serious about uranium, I'm not going to try to find a single company. I'm going to go to something like the URA ETF probably and buy uranium through that. But I think at some point it will run. It's been doing pretty well this year. Got to wait for that recession, in my opinion.
I want to touch on the subject of real estate, Dave. Prices are above 2008 levels in many states. Obviously, this is caused in part by low interest rates, but in other parts of the country, there's insufficient supply of housing, and that this is causing prices to rise. What's your opinion of housing overall? And if you have cash right now that you're looking to put in to real estate, would you go and actually buy residential real estate? Would you use other vehicles like loaning hard money or doing it through a real estate investment trust? There's so many options in the housing market. What I found personally is that if I look at the real estate investment trust, the publicly traded companies, I can invest in the type of real estate that I can't personally, in hospitals and homes for the elderly, and warehouses and server farms, etc., and government government offices, and this is something that I can't do as an individual. But on the flip side, that is not actually owning real estate, as owning stocks. So what's your opinion on this? I know you have a firm conviction.
I don't think I ever actually want to own real estate. Again, it's sort of outside my skill set. And one thing I've learned through the years is stay within your skill set. It is very dependent on what kind you're talking about. I would steer clear of commercial real estate. I think the huge amount of corporate debt is going to eventually get that. I find data is confusing in the residential real estate market, and I think it's consistent with the idea that a lot of the housing inventory in 07 and 09 that was sprung free by defaulting mortgagors. I think a lot of that was bought up by private equity guys, and they put together these big, huge packages. And now they rent them. Now, single-family rentals are a lousy business. What makes them work is the ultra super low cost of capital. And they say, well, now we can make some money. Rents have been soaring, so these guys are still making money. But if at some point rent stops soaring, that sort of bolus of housing inventory is going to hit the market. So I'd be worried about a rising rate market hitting not just the retail buyers, which it will, but it'll hit the guys who are trying to make serious money because money's cheap. And so the other thing you can see is that there's not a lot of new starts, if I remember this correctly. So the new starts are not as prevalent while the prices are going up. So this is a sort of a rising price, stagnant market paradox, and one could call that stagflation, right? One could say, well, the prices are going up, but there's not much sales. So I'm a little leery of that. The other kind of real estate you mentioned, way outside my skill set. Again, guys got rich during the Depression buying real estate at fire sale prices. What I do know is that you can't get rich if you don't have cash at the bottom, and you can't get rich there. You can't have cash if you're fully invested at the top, because you'll be dragged down to the bottom without cash. And so cash is eventually going to be king, in my opinion. Let's hope inflation doesn't take off and render that stuff worthless. So I've kind of got a big chunk of cash waiting to be put to work, but I'm not doing it till the next recession.
Well, I know that a tremendous amount of people share exactly your point of view. They wait, they cash up, they cash out. Obviously, inflation hasn't been a huge concern in the past few years. So money erosion, currency erosion has not been incredibly high. But now inflation is picking up, and people are going to be tempted to get into the markets again. But as you say, markets are very, very expensive, and this is the sort of stagflation that you're talking about. So it's definitely a topic to talk about, and that's why coal and uranium and all of these beaten down commodities are very, very intriguing, especially for the big banks and the private equity firms that have already exhausted the real estate markets. I want to speak with you about something close to your heart, and that is retirement. Americans that are approaching retirement, 4 out of 5 do not have more than $10,000 saved up. Now, I gotta say, the surveys that I've been researching say that this $10,000 barrier is not age dependent. Let me clarify myself. At the age of 20, 4 out of 5 people don't have $10,000. At the age of 25, same thing. 30, same thing. 35, same thing. It seems like Americans just cannot save no matter how many years they work. It's truly staggering. And there's 80 million people relying on the federal government for food. 42 million people on food stamps, but 80 million people are relying on them for Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, etc., disability. What will happen in the coming years when the federal government might have to do entitlement cuts and you'll have to face reality yourself and responsibility for yourself? What are some of the actions that people with insufficient savings can do? I know that every 2 minutes an American leaves the U.S. to retire outside, cheaper countries. Is there other solutions that you know?
No. No, there isn't. This reminds me of the situation where, say, a person gets told they have terminal cancer and they got 3 to 6 months to live, and they can't wrap their brain around how this will work out. And I think it's actually not just local, it's global. One of my colleagues wrote a book called The Global Pension Crisis. And he says, look, 50 years from now, we're still going to be feeling this. So instead of looking at means, averages, look at median. Median is the key number to focus on. And for example, the median boomer savings is something like $17,000. I cannot find a mathematical solution to that. That person is simply going to go into retirement broke. And you say, well, then they'll keep working. But, then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you have an aneurysm or you have a bypass. Next thing you know, you're not employable. And then you're going to be broke. And so it's this. The savers of the retirement plans of the boomers are terminal, in my opinion. And I can't picture the carnage, but I cannot see a mathematical escape from it.
Now, that median number that you talked about, just to clarify, these people have $17,000 saved up on the side and no assets?
Yeah. So I created one of my many mental constructs. I created the concept of a 5% guy. This was about 3 years ago, and the 5% guy makes $154,000. And he's worth $1.2 million. Now, I should clarify, I believe that number is based on assets and their real estate, which they've got to live somewhere. So that's dubious. But let's just pretend it's $1.2 million in the bank. So this is a person who lived the American dream. Yet if you do the math, by conventional portfolio theory, if this guy, this boomer who's at the 5% mark, retires today, she can take out about $48,000 a year without risking running out in old age. So a guy who's made 154, taking out 48,000, that guy's toast too. He's not ready for that. And then the question is, if the 5 percentile person is going to get clobbered, what is the 50 percentile person going to get? And that's an ugly picture.
Interesting. Look, Dave, I know you're a proponent of an IRA instead of a Roth IRA. Why is that? What are some of the problems that you've been able to pick up? And why don't you get in depth on the problems and what can people do? Because I know it's a challenge to make any changes to this. One day I was pondering this. I was actually looking at it to try to see if there was some way I could duck a coming problem. So I started paying attention. Turns out that if you take $1,000 and you track it, let's say you pay 20% taxes at that point in time. If you took 1,000, pay 20% taxes, now 800, put it in a normal IRA, tenfold multiple over the next couple decades, you got 8,000. If you put 10,000, that was without taxes, so you'll have 10,000. And when it comes out, if you pay 20%, you'll have 8,000. If you put money into a Roth and you pay 20% up front, tenfold gets you to 8,000 also. So there's nothing mystical about the compounding of a Roth. It's the same. The only question is, which one will your tax rate be higher? And the problem is, the Roth IRA, you are paying money at the marginal rate of taxes. If I'm $154,000 a year guy and I put money in a Roth, I am paying at the top tax bracket, that money going in.
And then when I take it out, it's going to come out at the effective tax rate, which is the tax bracket for 154 is maybe 33%, something like that. 48,000 coming out is coming out at around 7 or 8 or 10%. It's nothing. And so the fact of the matter is, by paying the marginal rate on the Roth going in and by paying the effective rate on the regular coming out, there is no comparison. When you go read about this somewhere, you go online, you find that there's a lot of doublespeak, and no one actually addresses this. Try to find a discussion of marginal versus effective tax rate. You won't find it. And so I presented this to 1,000 money managers and investors at a conference one day and said, look, I'm going to lay myself out here. Here's the case against the Roth. Tell me if I'm wrong, right? And I gave a half-hour talk. And at the end, not a single person told me I was wrong. So I wouldn't touch the Roth. I just wouldn't touch the Roth. And I would never, never roll over a regular to a Roth. Never.
Okay, people listening to this and they want to be part of the solution going forward. What would they do?
Stay away from the Roth. If you want a detailed presentation, I've written about 3 years ago. You can send me an email. I don't care. I answer my emails at dbc6@cornell.edu. I'll send you a link to what I wrote or a link to what to a presentation I gave. Debunk it if you want. I've tried, but no one has done it yet, including the former CEO of TD Asset Management and money manager. No one's debunked it.
Okay, and
scam.
Okay, going forward, can you choose to put money in a Roth instead of in a regular instead of a Roth if you have a Roth? Can you do that for the remainder of your life?
Once it's in a Roth, it's stuck, but you can choose to redirect it to a regular, and that's what I would recommend doing. And yeah.
Okay, I know one of the things that you're passionate about is the 2008 crisis, and I spoke to you before the interview, and we've communicated on this, the fact that the bankers were never convicted or even prosecuted by the United States government, and you told me that this was part of a larger framework and a larger theme by the United States government to say, okay, if we're going to prosecute these people, there will be ramifications. So basically, they became above law. There was a higher priority than prosecuting them. Is that a fair thing to say? And what do you feel about this as an American who pays taxes and works hard at being a professor of chemistry and teaching the children and the youth and the future of the nation?
So I think it's undeniable. A great example is Corzine, MF Global. He could have been prosecuted. Trivial to get to him. They chose not to. The Assistant Attorney General, Lanny Brewer, was caught on tape saying they didn't prosecute because they didn't want to disrupt the system. That got him fired within 2 days. And Eric Holder, the Attorney General, had written a memo on it, which has been published. It's online, in which he described the disadvantages of prosecuting. Now, here's the problem. In the 1930s, there was a lot of criminal activity then, too. And they set up a thing called the Pecora Commission, and they threw a lot of people in jail, including the president of the New York Stock Exchange, for criminal behavior. The problem with skipping that stage is that you've got hundreds of millions of people who feel unsatisfied. If we had cleansed the system, if Pecora 2.0 had come along, and even if they didn't get everyone, but if they hung a bunch of these bankers, then the populace might say, okay, I'm okay now, and I'm good, and we clean the system, and I'm ready to start over. Instead, we've got activism all over the country, all over the world. We've got Brexit. We've got Trump getting elected against all odds. These are reactions to people being mad and the sense that the system isn't fair. A Pecora-like commission would have mitigated that, but they decided it was not in their best interest. They might regret that decision, in my opinion.
In the bigger picture, I can definitely understand what you're saying. It was a mistake not to set the example for the future of the nation, and it's an interesting subject, no doubt. I want to touch base with you about the marijuana legalization process in the U.S. You know, you're a chemistry professor. Obviously, you have some direct and indirect opinions on this. What is going on? Because you're in a university, you get to see firsthand what's going on with 20-year-olds, etc. But you're also sick. You're about to hit retirement, so you know the beneficial uses of marijuana in the more medicinal side. So, what do you see? How do you see this?
Well, first and foremost, regardless of what I think, now that the states have figured out that it's a revenue-producing thing to legalize it. Not unlike the states discovering that maybe we shouldn't just leave the credit cards to Delaware and are all jumping into the credit card market, which requires some legal changes. Not unlike states deciding that maybe gambling wasn't so immoral after all, maybe we should have state lottos. We are going to have legalized marijuana, is my guess, because it's a revenue producer. It also cuts out the criminals, as in Prohibition, the mafia, the Al Capones would have been put out of business easier if there was no Prohibition. And so, and pot, as P.J. O'Rourke once said, I don't know of any drug that makes teenagers drive slower. And so the downside of pot is it's hard to have just a small amount. I don't know about you, but my previous experience with it is that one hit and I'm pretty much a goofball. And so beer safer in that sense, dose is better. But how many guys who get stoned out of their minds on pot and they get in a bar fight, right? So it's a different. So the dangers of alcohol far exceed pot, and therefore legalization of pot, why not? By the way, my wife is a medically authorized marijuana user due to chronic pain, and so I can see that side too.
Understood. People who want to plug and see your year in review, I know it's been on Zero Hedge because that's where I read it. It's a very thorough analysis, and you do it once a year, correct? So maybe you can tell people a little bit about this process that you go through, and when did it start, and just are we expecting a 2017 year in review?
We are. It started years ago. I used to go to a bear market chat board in the late 90s when there was about 24 of us who thought the markets were overvalued in a sea of euphoria. I started summarizing at the end of the year a couple of paragraphs for my friends who turned out were much more prominent people than I realized. They had silly screen names, but they were guys who sent me an email and said, by the way, I run the such and such fund at Goldman. I go, wow, I didn't know that. The name Yogi Bear didn't exactly tip me off. And so I started summarizing. Then one time the click count went out of control. And I said, wow, that must have escaped the containment field of that chat board. And every year it got bigger and bigger. So I might be up to a couple 100,000 clicks if you sum up the different sites. And since I only write one a year, that's a pretty good for a poorly marketed thing. But every December I write it. It's under my name, David B. Collum, and it's titled Year in Review, usually with some subtext of what I saw that year. And I use it to summarize in my head what I saw all year and to collect it all back and not forget it. And then I try to find a Michael Lewis-like narrative that in which I try to find the stories underneath the stories. And that's what Lewis is superb at. And I just try to do it in my own little way. And so I will find themes. I go, oh, that's a good theme. And so I talk about campus life. I think college campuses are going insane, and anything that hits my fancy. Last year, I talked about the absurd notion that people use about cash on the sidelines and investing. It's a appallingly ignorant language that you hear on CNBC, and so any bug that crawls up a dark place on me, I write about it, and I do it just once a year. So it's a bit of a tour de force in the sense that I end up writing about 100 plus pages, and I've got to do it at the end of the year. So it's a sprint, right? It's a complex thing. I think it's funny. I think I'm able to put a humor spin on it, and a little bit of Dave Barry sneaks in, I guess.
I love it. It has some great quotes and some great content. And Dave, I'd like to thank you very much for this interview. You've been very gracious with your time, and I've definitely enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
Dave writes one of the best comprehensive year-in review reports, and I had a great time and a great privilege to discuss energy policies and future applications of minerals, real estate, retirement, and the marijuana legalization process. And especially being a professor of chemistry in Cornell, he has a great view and perspective of this marijuana legalization process. If you've been paying attention to politics, you know that our Secretary of Energy is Rick Perry, former governor of Texas and a proponent of nuclear energy. He loves it. And if you're not aware, 21% of US households are getting their electricity from nuclear power, but 95% of it is imported. This is about to change radically during the Trump era, because obviously making America great again means becoming a manufacturing giant again. And I think you should go to wealthresearchgroup.com/uranium fortunes, where I discussed this nuclear energy revolution. And after 6 years of bear market, prices are up already 40% since Trump got elected. It's a big move, and the opportunity is incredible. Between 2009 and 2013, my partner and I ran numerous real estate businesses, and Dave spoke about the fact that he doesn't invest in real estate personally. And if you don't know what you're doing, that's a great and smart advice, and it's a smart move. But if you gain proper knowledge, real estate can be a great off Wall Street diversification asset. Right now, we launched our debut exclusive report on the strategy my partner and I used for 5 straight years in multiple markets throughout the US, including Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, and Texas, to generate no money down $3,000 to $5,000 quick 2 to 3 week deals. This great strategy works in an up market, down market, seller's market, buyer's market. It doesn't matter. It's a great strategy, and I think you should add it to your skill set. If you can make it work, then this is another income stream for you. If you make it work big, this could be what you do. This report will be on our special reports tab on the website. You can go there, check it out. Retirement, I look 20 years ahead, and I see so many Western societies with millions of people over 90 years old. It is illogical to think that governments would be able to provide for them for 25 years after they retire at 65. People need to build their own asset portfolio. People need cash flow, assets, and they need financial education. Wealth Research Group was founded for this reason, providing a rich plethora of publications so you can learn to build your asset empire with us. Lastly, and I cover this topic a lot because I think it's important, the subject of marijuana legalization. We are all over this investment opportunity, and I want to make clear that you should be taking this seriously. The numbers are staggering, and the door is wide open to become a first-generation investor. I mean, how many industries can you say that about? Go to wealthresearchgroup.com/cannabis profits for the details and the facts. In the coming weeks, we will keep covering Bitcoin, precious metals, marijuana, Trump, and the global economy. Thanks for tuning in.